I thought the police had ended everything. But one night, after returning home from work, I entered my bedroom and found 4 words written above my bed in something dark and wet. I will never leave you. That was the moment I understood. My grandfather was still alive, and whatever had lived beneath that building had followed me back to Cairo. But to understand how I got there, I have to take you back to the phone call that started everything. My name is Rayan. I was 32 years old, working as an architect in Cairo, when my grandfather called me one evening. His voice was weak. "Rayan, your grandmother is gone." For a few seconds, I said nothing. She had raised me when my parents separated. She had protected me, fed me, and treated me like her own son. I asked for leave from work and drove toward the village before sunrise. I believed I was returning only for her funeral. I had no idea I was driving toward a place that had been waiting for me. My grandparents lived in an old 2-story building beside the town cemetery. There were 2 apartments on each floor. My grandfather lived downstairs. Across from him lived Marwan and his family. Upstairs were 2 more apartments. One belonged to Uncle Fuad, but it had been abandoned for years. The other belonged to Uncle Sabri, a quiet widower who lived alone. The building stood so close to the cemetery wall that the graves were visible from the upper windows. During the funeral, I noticed something strange. The residents avoided looking at me. Some whispered when I passed. Others stepped away as if my presence frightened them. At the time, I blamed their behavior on grief. Soon learned that they were not afraid of me. They were afraid of what my arrival might awaken. A few nights after the funeral, a violent storm hit the village. Rain struck the windows and thunder shook the walls. I was sitting alone in my room when I heard tapping against the window overlooking the open shaft between the apartments. At first, I thought it was a tree branch. Then it came again. 3 slow knocks. I opened the window, but there was nothing outside. As I began to close it, a bright orange glow appeared across the shaft. It came from Uncle Fuad's empty apartment. For several seconds, I could clearly see flames moving behind the glass. I ran upstairs, terrified that the building might burn. But when I reached the apartment, the door was locked. There was no smoke, no heat, and no fire. The next morning, I told my grandfather what I had seen. He continued eating as if I had said nothing important. "Old buildings make strange sounds," he said, "and lightning can deceive the eyes." His calmness made me uncomfortable. Later, I met Uncle Sabri at the small cafe near the building. When I mentioned the fire, the smile disappeared from his face. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "This building is full of things no one understands." I asked him what he meant. He stared toward the cemetery and whispered, "Your grandmother heard them too. Footsteps, knocking, voices from empty rooms." Before I could ask more, he stood up and left. For the first time, I wondered whether my grandfather was hiding something from me. That night, I heard a soft laugh outside. It sounded like a young girl. I followed it into the courtyard beside the cemetery. At first, I saw nothing. Then I looked up. A teenage girl was sitting on top of the cemetery wall. Her back was turned toward me. Her pale dress moved gently in the wind, but her body remained completely still. I called out to her, "Are you okay?" Slowly, she began to turn her head. Before I could see her face, she disappeared. Not climbed down, not jumped. She simply vanished. Then her laughter came from somewhere inside the cemetery, closer than before. I returned to my room and tried to write down everything that had happened. But when I opened my notebook, I found a sentence written across the page in dark red letters. "Leave, Rayan." I knew I had not written it. Before I could call my grandfather, a scream echoed through the corridor. Marwan's wife burst from their apartment, crying and shouting,
My daughter is going to die. She is going to die.
Marwan dragged her back inside and slammed the door. I stood there holding the notebook, unable to move. The message in my hand no longer felt like a warning. The next afternoon, Uncle Fuad returned to the building. He looked exhausted, as though he had not slept in years. I asked him why he had abandoned his apartment. His eyes filled with tears. "My daughter, Salma, died there," he said. One evening, a fire suddenly appeared inside the kitchen. There was no damaged wiring, no gas leak, no explanation. By the time they reached her, it was too late. Fuad said that before the fire, Salma had complained about seeing a girl in the corridor. A girl who stood outside her bedroom every night. When I asked if the girl wore a pale dress, Fuad looked at me in horror. Then he walked away without answering. The following evening, Uncle Sabri did not come to the cafe. I went upstairs and knocked on his door. There was no answer, but the door moved slightly under my hand. It was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was completely dark. I called his name. "Uncle Sabri?" Something moved deep inside the flat. Then I heard a voice. It was low, broken, and not entirely human. "Leave." I stepped back. The voice repeated itself, louder this time. "Leave. Leave." I ran downstairs and locked myself inside my room. But for the rest of the night, I heard slow footsteps moving above my ceiling. The next evening, I sat at the cafe trying to decide whether to return to Cairo. Two cemetery workers were sitting nearby. They were discussing strange objects they had discovered between the graves. Candles, animal remains, and symbols carved into the soil. They said someone was entering the cemetery at night, even though its gate was guarded. Later, when I returned to the building, I heard voices coming from my grandfather's study. Marwan was inside. He sounded terrified.
"Please, do not hurt my daughter. I will give you whatever you want."
My grandfather answered in a calm voice.
"You should have paid what you owed me."
I stepped away before they noticed me. At that moment, I knew the strange events were connected to my grandfather. I just did not yet understand how. The next morning, screams filled the building. Uncle Sabri had been found dead inside his apartment. There was blood across the floor and walls. But the strangest part was that there were no signs of anyone breaking in. An old neighbor pulled me aside and told me something no one had mentioned before. Years earlier, Sabri's daughter had died after falling from the balcony. Everyone called it suicide. But Sabri had never believed that. He had spent years searching for the truth. And, according to the neighbor, the only person who knew what had truly happened was my grandfather. That was when fear became certainty. The evil in that building was not following my grandfather. It was coming from him. That night, after making sure my grandfather was asleep, I entered his private study. He never allowed anyone inside. Books and papers covered the shelves and floor. While searching, I noticed that part of the rug sounded hollow beneath my feet. I pulled it aside. Underneath was a wooden trapdoor. I opened it and found a narrow staircase descending underground. Symbols covered the walls. The tunnel led beneath the building toward the cemetery. At the end was a hidden chamber filled with candles, animal remains, talismans, and names written inside an old notebook. Fuad, Salma, Sabri, Marwan. Next to each name were payments, threats, and instructions. Then I found a sentence written by my grandfather. Marwan's daughter will be the next sacrifice if he refuses to pay. My grandfather had used the fear, deaths, and suffering of everyone in the building to control them. I heard the chamber door open behind me. My grandfather stood at the entrance holding a knife. He did not deny anything. He told me he had spent years performing rituals beneath the building. He claimed the dead gave him protection, money, and power. Fuad had refused to pay him. So Salma died. Sabri had come too close to discovering the truth, so he was silenced. Marwan had helped him move objects through the cemetery, but later tried to escape their agreement. I asked him about the ghost girl. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. "Some spirits," he whispered, "do not obey." Then he raised the knife and moved toward me. I pushed him with all my strength. He struck the stone wall and fell. I did not wait to see if he was dead. I ran through the tunnel, climbed out of the study, and drove directly to the police station. The police returned with me before sunrise. They opened the trap door and searched the underground chamber. All the evidence was still there. The notebook, the ritual objects, the blood. But my grandfather had disappeared. At the far end of the tunnel, they found a second door leading directly into the cemetery. It was wide open. The police searched the graves and surrounding streets, but they never found him. Marwan was arrested. During questioning, he admitted that he had helped my grandfather for years. The authorities sealed the building and moved the remaining residents somewhere else. I returned to Cairo and tried to forget everything. For several weeks, nothing happened. Then, one night, after a long day at work, I entered my bedroom. Above my bed was a fresh message written in blood. "I will never leave you." The police never found my grandfather, and to this day, I still do not know whether the message came from him or from one of the spirits he could no longer control.